Adolf Hitler, one of the most reviled figures in history, evokes a profound sense of dread and repulsion for the indelible atrocities he orchestrated during his time in power. His leadership of Nazi Germany is synonymous with the darkest chapters of the 20th century, from the Holocaust to World War II. However, beneath this curtain of infamy lies a complex figure whose rule was not entirely devoid of policies and actions perceived as beneficial, albeit controversially. This video explores both the positive and negative aspects of Adolf Hitler's legacy, offering a nuanced perspective on a man whose actions had far-reaching consequences, both horrifying and, in rare instances, considered constructive. It is a journey through the dark and the light in the life of a man whose impact on history remains unparalleled. Adolf Hitler's early life was marked by a series of personal, social, and political events that would eventually lead him to a position of immense power and infamy. Here are some key points about his early years. Birth and family. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889, in Braunau am Inn, a small town in Austria-Hungary, now Austria. He was the fourth of 6 children born to Alois Hitler and Clara Pals. 3 of his siblings died in infancy. Childhood in Linz and Passau. The family moved to Linz when Adolf was young, and then to Passau, Germany, where he attended school briefly. His early years were marked by a difficult relationship with his strict father. Artistic ambitions. Hitler showed an early interest in art and wanted to become a painter. He twice applied to the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna but was rejected both times. Vienna years. In 1907, after his mother's death, Hitler moved to Vienna, Austria, and lived in poverty as a struggling artist. During this time, he developed strong nationalist and anti-Semitic views, influenced by the prevailing political and social climate. Adolf Hitler's rise to power in Germany is a complex and tumultuous story that involved a combination of political cunning, economic hardship, and societal factors. His journey to power can be broken down into several key stages. Early involvement in politics. Hitler's entry into politics began when he joined the German Workers' Party, DAP, in 1919, which would later become the National Socialist German Workers' Party, Nazi Party. He quickly rose through the ranks of the party due to his effective oratory and propaganda skills. Munich Beer Hall Putsch. In 1923, Hitler, along with his followers, attempted to overthrow the Weimar government in what became known as the Munich Beer Hall Putsch. This coup attempt failed, and Hitler was arrested and sentenced to prison. While in prison, he wrote his autobiography and political manifesto, Mein Kampf. Legal political activity. After his release from prison, Hitler decided to gain power through legal and democratic means. He focused on expanding the Nazi Party's influence by participating in elections and using propaganda to attract more supporters. The Great Depression. The worldwide economic depression of the late 1920s and early 1930s had a significant impact on Germany. The economic hardship and widespread unemployment created fertile ground for extremist parties, including the Nazis, who promised economic recovery and national renewal. Appointment as chancellor. The turning point came in January 1933 when conservative politicians believed they could control Hitler and his movement. President Paul von Hindenburg, under pressure from influential conservatives, appointed Hitler as Chancellor of Germany. Consolidation of power. After becoming Chancellor, Hitler moved swiftly to consolidate his power. He used various tactics to undermine democratic institutions and silence political opponents. The Reichstag fire in February 1933 was exploited to pass the Reichstag Fire Decree, which suspended civil liberties and allowed for the arrest of political rivals. The Enabling Act, passed in March 1933, effectively gave Hitler the authority to enact laws without Reichstag approval. Elimination of political opposition. Hitler's regime systematically eliminated political opposition, stifled dissent, and established a totalitarian state. The SA, Sturm of Tyrant, and SS, Schutzstaffel, played key roles in this process, along with the Gestapo and other paramilitary groups. Führer and Reich president. After President Hindenburg's death in 1934, Hitler combined the roles of chancellor and president, declaring himself Führer and Reich president. This concentration of power solidified his absolute authority in Germany. From that point on, Hitler ruled Germany with an iron fist, implemented repressive and discriminatory policies, and embarked on a path of militarization and territorial expansion, eventually leading the world into World War II. His rise to power is a stark reminder of how the convergence of economic crises, political maneuvering, and societal factors can lead to the ascent of authoritarian leaders with catastrophic consequences. Adolf Hitler played a central and devastating role in World War II, which is one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. Here is an overview of Hitler's involvement in World War II. Aggression and expansion. Hitler's aggressive foreign policy, which aimed to expand German territory, was a major factor in the outbreak of World War II. He ordered the invasion of Poland on September 1, 1939, triggering the war. This prompted Britain and France to declare war on Germany 2 days later. Blitzkrieg tactics. Hitler's military strategy relied on blitzkrieg, lightning war, tactics, which involved the rapid and coordinated use of tanks, infantry, and air support. These tactics were used effectively in early campaigns, leading to the swift capture of several European countries. Occupation of Europe. Over the course of the war, Nazi Germany occupied and controlled vast portions of Europe, including France, Belgium, the Netherlands, Norway, Denmark, and much of Eastern Europe. The Holocaust was also implemented during this time, leading to the systematic persecution and murder of millions of Jews and other minority groups. Alliances. Hitler formed alliances with Italy, under Mussolini, and Japan, creating the Axis powers. These alliances drew other countries into the war. Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941 brought the United States into the conflict. Eastern Front. One of the most significant aspects of World War II was the Eastern Front, where Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union in June 1941. This campaign resulted in some of the deadliest battles and a massive loss of life, especially for the Soviet Union. The turning point on the Eastern Front came with the Soviet victory at the Battle of Stalingrad in 1943. Deterioration of the Axis powers. As the war progressed, the Axis powers faced increasing challenges. Allied forces, including the United States, the United Kingdom, and the Soviet Union, launched offensives in Europe and the Pacific, slowly but steadily gaining the upper hand. Defeat and downfall. By 1945, Nazi Germany was on the brink of defeat. Hitler remained in his underground bunker in Berlin, even as the city was surrounded by Soviet forces. On April 30, 1945, with the war's end imminent, Hitler and some of his closest associates, including Eva Braun, committed suicide. Germany formally surrendered on May 7, 1945. Aftermath. World War II left a devastating legacy. It resulted in the death of tens of millions of people, the widespread destruction of cities and infrastructure, and profound geopolitical changes. The war's aftermath led to the Nuremberg trials, where Nazi leaders were tried for war crimes and crimes against humanity. Adolf Hitler's aggressive expansionist policies and his commitment to the Nazi ideology played a central role in sparking World War II and its catastrophic consequences. His regime's actions during the war, including the Holocaust and the occupation of Europe, left a lasting mark on history as one of the darkest chapters in human experience. Adolf Hitler's hatred of Jews, known as anti-Semitism, was a central component of his ideology and played a significant role in the policies and actions of the Nazi regime. Several factors contributed to Hitler's anti-Semitic beliefs and policies. Historical precedents. Anti-Semitism had deep historical roots in Europe, dating back centuries. It was fueled by religious prejudice, economic competition, and social stereotypes. Hitler's beliefs were shaped by this long history of anti-Jewish sentiments. Racial ideology. Hitler subscribed to a twisted and pseudoscientific view of race, which considered the Aryan race, a term he misappropriated, to be superior and believed that Jews posed a threat to the purity and supremacy of the Aryan race. Scapegoating. In times of economic and political turmoil, scapegoating can be a powerful tool for politicians seeking to deflect blame and rally support. Hitler and the Nazis used anti-Semitic propaganda to blame Jews for Germany's economic problems and other societal issues. Propaganda and stereotyping. The Nazis, under Joseph Goebbels' leadership, engaged in a massive propaganda campaign that portrayed Jews as dangerous, manipulative, and responsible for the world's ills. This relentless demonization reinforced anti-Semitic sentiments in Nazi Germany. Ideological factors: Hitler's early experiences in Vienna, where he was exposed to various anti-Semitic and nationalist groups, influenced his worldview. He was drawn to the ideas of thinkers and writers who promoted anti-Semitic beliefs. Political exploitation: Hitler recognized that anti-Semitism could be a unifying force for his political movement. By scapegoating Jews and promising to eradicate what he called the Jewish question, he garnered support from those who held anti-Semitic views. Eugenics and racial purity: Hitler's obsession with racial purity and the idea of a master race led to a belief that Jews needed to be eliminated to preserve the Aryan race. Establishment of a totalitarian state: once in power, Hitler and the Nazis implemented anti-Semitic laws and policies with devastating consequences, including the Nuremberg Laws, the Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass, pogrom, and, eventually, the Holocaust. It's important to note that Hitler's anti-Semitic ideology was not based on any rational or factual assessment of Jewish people. It was an irrational and hate-fueled belief that led to unimaginable suffering and the systematic murder of millions during the Holocaust. Hitler's virulent anti-Semitism is a dark reminder of the dangers of hatred and prejudice when allowed to take hold in a society. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime implemented a systematic and brutal plan to persecute and ultimately exterminate the Jews during World War II. This campaign, known as the Holocaust, resulted in the murder of approximately 6 million Jews and is one of the most horrific atrocities in human history. The persecution of Jews under Hitler's rule included several key elements. Anti-Semitic laws: the Nazis enacted a series of anti-Semitic laws that stripped Jews of their rights and freedoms. The Nuremberg Laws of 1935, for example, defined who was considered Jewish and imposed numerous discriminatory measures against Jews. Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass: on November 9 to 10, 1938, Nazi paramilitary forces and civilians carried out a coordinated attack on Jewish businesses, synagogues, and homes throughout Germany and Austria. The violence resulted in widespread destruction and the arrest of thousands of Jews. Ghettos: the Nazis established ghettos in various European cities to confine and isolate Jewish populations. Conditions in these ghettos were often deplorable, with overcrowding, disease, and starvation. Concentration camps: Jews, along with other targeted groups, were rounded up and sent to concentration camps. These camps initially served as places of forced labor and confinement. Conditions were harsh, and many died from overwork, disease, and malnutrition. Extermination camps: as the war progressed, the Nazis implemented the final solution, a plan for the systematic murder of Europe's Jewish population. Extermination camps, such as Auschwitz, Sobibor, and Treblinka, were established solely for the purpose of mass murder. Gas chambers and crematoria were used to efficiently carry out the genocide. Mass shootings: in addition to the extermination camps, mass shootings were used to kill Jews and other undesirable groups, particularly in Eastern Europe. Einsatzgruppen, mobile killing units, were responsible for carrying out these mass shootings. Medical experiments: some Jews and other inmates of concentration camps were subjected to inhumane medical experiments, often resulting in their suffering or death. Forced labor: many Jews were subjected to forced labor in factories and camps, where they endured grueling work under brutal conditions. The Holocaust, which lasted from 1941 to 1945, represents a horrifying chapter in history marked by the genocide and suffering of millions of Jews and others. It is a stark reminder of the consequences of hatred, prejudice, and the dangers of unchecked authoritarianism. The memory of the Holocaust serves as a somber reminder of the importance of tolerance, human rights, and the prevention of such atrocities in the future. Adolf Hitler died by suicide on April 30, 1945, in his underground bunker, known as the Führer bunker, in Berlin, Germany. This occurred during the closing days of World War II and as Soviet forces were rapidly advancing on the city. The circumstances surrounding Hitler's death are as follows. Last days in the bunker: as Soviet forces closed in on Berlin in late April 1945, Hitler and his closest associates took refuge in the underground bunker. It had become clear that the war was lost for Nazi Germany, and Berlin was under heavy bombardment. Marriage to Eva Braun. On April 29, 1945, Hitler married Eva Braun, his longtime companion, in a civil ceremony in the bunker. Suicide. On the following day, April 30, 1945, Adolf Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide in the bunker. Hitler is believed to have shot himself in the head, and Eva Braun took poison. Their bodies were later carried out of the bunker, doused with gasoline, and set on fire. End of the war. With Hitler's death, his successor as head of state, Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, announced the unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany on May 7, 1945. The remains, Hitler's remains, were never publicly displayed. They were initially buried in a shell crater in the garden of the Reich Chancellery, and later exhumed and reburied multiple times. In 1970, the remains were secretly burned, and the ashes were scattered to prevent any potential memorial or shrine. Hitler's death marked the end of his leadership in the Nazi regime, which had caused immense suffering and devastation throughout Europe and the world during World War II. After Adolf Hitler's death by suicide in his underground bunker in Berlin on April 30, 1945, several events and developments occurred related to his body, legacy, and the aftermath of World War II. End of World War II. Hitler's death marked the end of the Nazi regime and the immediate military threat posed by Nazi Germany. It also paved the way for the unconditional surrender of Nazi forces in May 1945. Discovery of his remains. After Hitler's death, his body and that of Eva Braun, who had also committed suicide, were found in the bunker. Eva Braun's body was identified and buried in the garden of the Reich Chancellery. The disposal of the bodies, Hitler's body, however, was doused with gasoline and burned by his personal staff in the garden, as the Soviet forces were closing in on Berlin. The remains of both Hitler and Braun were buried in a shell crater near the bunker. The remains rediscovered. In 1970, the East German government secretly exhumed the remains and burned them again. The ashes were then scattered in the Elbe River to prevent any potential memorial or shrine. Nuremberg trials. The major Nazi war criminals, including high-ranking officials in the Nazi regime, were tried at the Nuremberg trials. These trials set important precedents for the prosecution of individuals for war crimes, crimes against humanity, and genocide. Legacy and historical understanding. Hitler's actions during World War II and the Holocaust continue to be studied and remembered as one of the darkest chapters in human history. The legacy of his regime serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authoritarianism and prejudice. Division of Germany. The end of World War II led to the division of Germany into East and West, with the East under Soviet influence and the West under the control of the Allied powers. This division persisted during the Cold War. Reconstruction of Europe. The post-war years saw extensive efforts to reconstruct and rebuild war-torn Europe. These efforts were instrumental in the continent's recovery and the establishment of new international organizations like the United Nations. Adolf Hitler's death marked the conclusion of his rule, but his actions and their consequences continued to shape the world long after his passing. His regime's legacy remains a potent reminder of the atrocities committed during World War II and the need for vigilance against authoritarianism and prejudice in the modern world. Adolf Hitler's impact on the world was profound and overwhelmingly negative. He played a central role in several significant events and developments, with far-reaching consequences. Here are some of the key aspects of Hitler's impact. World War II. Hitler's aggressive foreign policy and expansionist ambitions led to the outbreak of World War II in 1939. This global conflict resulted in the loss of millions of lives, widespread destruction, and profound geopolitical changes. The Holocaust. One of the darkest aspects of Hitler's impact was the Holocaust, in which 6 million Jews and millions of others, including Romani people, disabled individuals, and political dissidents, were systematically persecuted and murdered in concentration and extermination camps. European devastation. Hitler's military campaigns and policies caused immense destruction in Europe. Entire cities were reduced to rubble, and countries were left in ruins. The post-war reconstruction efforts were extensive. Racial ideology. Hitler's promotion of an Aryan master race and persecution of other racial and ethnic groups left a legacy of hatred and prejudice. The world was forced to confront the consequences of unchecked racism and discrimination. Genocidal acts. Hitler's regime engaged in acts of genocide, not only against Jews but also against other minority groups, leading to immense suffering and loss of life. Changes in international law. The Nuremberg trials, held after World War II, established a precedent for prosecuting individuals for war crimes and crimes against humanity. The trials contributed to the development of modern international law. Historical awareness. Hitler's actions and the Holocaust have led to a heightened awareness of the need to prevent and address genocide, and they serve as a stark reminder of the horrors that can result from unchecked authoritarianism. Psychological impact. Hitler's regime left deep psychological scars on the survivors and their descendants, as well as on those who witnessed or learned about the atrocities. The trauma and horror of the Holocaust continue to shape the collective memory of many nations. Post-war divisions. The end of World War II led to the division of Germany into East and West, with the Cold War emerging as a significant geopolitical struggle. Economic and social consequences. The war and its aftermath had profound economic and social consequences, leading to the reconfiguration of Europe and the establishment of new international organizations like the United Nations. Adolf Hitler's impact on history is primarily associated with immense suffering, destruction, and loss of life. The legacy of his actions serves as a stark reminder of the need for vigilance against authoritarianism, hatred, and discrimination in the modern world.